This work comes out of my master's thesis and dissertation. So it's placed in U.S. public education. I had three school districts in New Jersey that I had very high level access to qualitative, quantitative data with surveys. And why I think it's fitting for CRIMP in this community, and also is related to what was spoken about in the earlier plenary where Tom Koken was speaking, is because the reason I think it's fitting here is because it's focused on voice. I know the title doesn't say that, but the outcome I'm really interested in is voice and teacher voice. And there's popular media that says, "Oh, rewriting the rules of work, the importance of employee voice." Everyone knows it's important, right? There's even HR consultants, which I have some examples here. And then Tom Koken and colleagues have done a study to say that, people want voice in the workplace, but there's a gap of what they actually get to achieve when it comes to voice. So how do you close that gap? How do you get to voice? What is the way to achieve voice? And from an industrial relations background, which is where what I'm trained in, there's kind of two schools of thought here. It's this institutionalist idea where we have a union or some labor market institution or mechanism. And then there's a unitarist perspective, which is traditionally what HRM and human resource managers kind of think. So that's the different ways to achieve voice. So one is through an institution, maybe being a union or some other labor market mechanism. And the other is through, managers being like top down. Essentially, HR can create opportunities for voice for employees. And here there's different types of voice. Here I'm kind of defining it broadly as the ability to have meaningful input, employee input into decision making. So this isn't a new question. Primarily what has been done in the research is looking at these differential or complementary effects on voice between these two perspectives. So looking at unions and their interaction with human resource management systems, or even when there is a system of labor management partnership, which is what I'm focusing on, which is where the union acts as a vehicle for employee voice. And that's what it attempts to do, to make decisions with management. And the union is kind of the intermediary there, but also the one that's trying to influence this. A traditional HRM's perspective, which is the unitarist perspective, would say that, the union isn't necessary. We can achieve employee voice on our own and have them, in certain employee engagement types of surveys or participation in other ways. But pretty much to say that the evidence is very much mixed. Primarily, I think this is because, and this is across human resource management studies as well as traditional industrial relations studies, I think this is primarily mixed because we're thinking of things as a system, which is beneficial in some ways, but I think we're sometimes forget about the individual actors that are actually implementing these systems or operate even outside the system. So here, as I mentioned, voice research focused on union and partnership interaction with these actual systems and practices. Whereas what I'm thinking about is, okay, we don't have the answer to which leads to better voice or more voice. Are they differential? Are they complementary? So what about the individual leadership of middle management? Can they be collaborative in their own right? And these managers, for me, I'm looking at principles in the public education context in the US, but these people can exist and these managers can exist outside of the HRM function. So I'm looking at, again, these individual leaders who may be collaborative or not, but it's kind of outside that human resource management function. And I think that's where this complementarity, if there is one, which I will say there is with contingencies, is to be found, rather than, which is interesting because the previous literature has said that there's mixed evidence on this. So again, this kind of the broad question is this interplay between labor management partnership, which is this institutionalist perspective, and collaborative leadership. Again, it's within the HRM realm, but I'm looking at a leadership of an individual. And how do you achieve voice that through either one of those mechanisms or both of them? So again, just kind of to get into the measures and ideas that I'm doing. Labor management partnership, if you're not aware, it's a structure and process designed as a vehicle for employee voice through unions. And this should be operating throughout the entire organization, so multi-level. So in public education, it would be from the teachers in the classroom to the school to the superintendent of a district level. Collaborative leadership is personal and individual relations of a leader. So again, I'm looking at principles of middle managers that can encourage and facilitate collaboration and voice. This extends beyond the human resource manager strategy a style and a behavior, so to speak, and it primarily looks at the unit level because they're interacting individually with teachers within a unit or a school. And then again, as I mentioned, voice, I'm kind of conceptualizing this broadly. So this is just kind of a visual way to represent what I'm thinking about here. So on the left, you have a collaborative leadership model. So that's the manager right there speaking to the yellow dots, which are employees, right? So teachers in this example. And then on the right, you have the institution of partnership, which is where there's a union representative, a manager, who interact with each other on like a team, so to speak, or some other sort of structure where there's more back and forth, and the union is acting again as this kind of vehicle and involving. So one is again individual, the other one is more institutional. And then are they complementary in achieving voice, or do they have differential effects? So again, getting into the setting design, this is taking place in U.S. publication in New Jersey, where Rutgers University is. The U.S. public education industry is highly unionized. It has over 3 million members. The National Education Association is the biggest one. And that's the affiliates of the NEA are the unions that are in the sample that I have. What's nice about the setting of U.S. public education is that there's a stable hierarchy. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but for the research it is. Superintendent is a leader of the district and the principal is the leader of the school. So I get to see a lot of, so this is kind of, comparing school districts is kind of nice because there's really not much variation. So the variation that does occur in voice or in, collaborative leadership is primarily done within a school principal setting. And the union management relations are traditionally more adversarial. I'm sure you've heard some cases in the US in the past decade or so. But the sample of districts that I have and have had access to over the past since 2017 have adopted a system of labor management partnership to try and change those adversarial relations. So I collected data from 2017 on through COVID of over observations, interviews, over 70 educators, including administration, teachers, union leaders, across 13 schools in 3 public school districts across New Jersey. I did this before, during, and after COVID. So while I do, but not part of this presentation, I don't have things related directly to COVID and questions in this presentation. It is during that time period. And then I also, based on the qualitative data, I administered a survey between fall 2021 to spring 2022 across these 3 districts as well. All 3 districts have some form of partnership implemented in their schools since about 2017, but they have varying degrees of effectiveness in those systems, as well as collaborative leadership of this principle. So that again, that's where that variation is, even though the structure is kind of the same. So the way I'm analyzing this, and I'm still trying to think about the best way to explain qualitative comparative analysis, a method that mixes quantitative and qualitative analyses. And I will do my best to do it. I'm happy to talk offline about it, and I'm going to give you a few tables to kind of show what I mean in the results. But the reason is I think it's difficult to kind of understand, but I do think it has advantages to traditional quantitative methods, is that it's case oriented, that tries to combine qualitative and quantitative techniques. It looks at complex combinations of variables that are interconnected rather than isolated entities that compete for power in explaining a model. So for example, in an OLS regression model, you have one line for the best outcome, and those variables within the independent variables within that model are competing to explain variation in the dependent variable. This throws that out the window and essentially says that these things can combine on their own, at these independent variables, to strengthen, so that they're not competing for power to explain something. It focuses on the presence and absence of variables in different configurations that a case may represent. Here, a case is a school. So my analysis is at the school level, and I'll get to that in a second. The way this works is it uses an algorithm based on empirical cases to identify all logically possible combinations of the presence or absence of variables, which I'll call past, which I'll explain in a second, that can lead to an outcome. And that means that it takes and uses an algorithm based on the empirical data that you put into the algorithm, and it finds all of the logically possible based on the empirical data that you include, all of the logically possible, even if they're not present empirically. So that's pretty much what it does. So it's explaining everything that could happen. And one thing I really like about this is that it has equifinality and asymmetry. So you can have multiple paths to achieve voice. Remember how I said how a regression analysis, it's one straight line, so there's one path. Here, could be multiple paths, and I'll show you in a second, to achieve voice. So X leading to Y does not necessarily mean that not having X does not lead to Y. So in a correlational approach, if X goes up, Y goes up. If X goes down, Y goes down. That's not the case for in this type of analysis. And it's originally designed for small to medium sized end studies. So essentially I have all these types of data, qualitative, quantitative, and I have been in, it's kind of an iterative approach where I can go back to the analysis and then go back to the data and change the kind of adapt the algorithm based on what I'm thinking based on the qualitative data. And again, since it's small to medium sized end studies, I have 13, so it's kind of perfect there. So bear with me here as I try to explain this. First, I want to just say on the left, these are the dimensions of partnership. So that institutional box there, I wish I had a pointer. Can I use this? Hi, can you guys see it? Okay. So this right here are the 3 dimensions of partnership that I measured. I won't get into the measures. I'm happy to talk about that offline. They're based on, again, the qualitative data as well as the survey data. And then here, the bottom left here is collaborative leadership. So there's 2 measures, dimensions of collaborative leadership. This center box here, and you can think of this as, if you've seen like in, I don't know, an economics journal or something, how there's different models. That's what these paths are. So there's 3 ways to achieve voice based on this algorithm, which is what qualitative comparative analysis uses. And then I have another measure of high voice. So there's 1 path to achieve that. And again, this is based on the 13 school districts, but also accounting for all the logical possible combinations. And again, the idea here is to look at how the institutional partnership and collaborative leadership can interact together to produce voice. So here, there's multiple paths. There's 3 paths to voice, which is a high level of voice, and then a higher level of voice, there's 1 path. And then this squiggly here, I'm denoting as silence, the different measure. So it's the opposite of voice, which is also something that's kind of useful to leverage with QCA, is you can do the opposite, essentially like not having voice. So you can measure that, which again is not possible in regression analysis. So I'm going to go through all of these. The coverage can be interpreted as an R squared. It's the percentage of cases that are covered within that path to voice. So I'm going to go through these one by one to try to explain this. So here, this is where, again, all of these are where voice is achieved except path 5, 2 minutes. Okay, well, I'm going to have to blow through this. So partnership quality is present. District support is present. And again, partnership quality is at the school level. District support is a dimension of partnership at the district level. And then the teacher, and I should mention that the black dots denote presence and this empty circles denote absence. And if it's blank, it means it's a do not care condition, and meaning it wouldn't matter if it was present or absent anyway. So here, voice, there's 2 dimensions. Again, I wish I could have time to get into the actual dimensions, but I think they're interesting. Talk about it later, but I do want to get through this. Partnership quality and district support are present, while empowering leadership and managerial openness, both dimensions of collaborative leadership are present, and that is one way to achieve voice. And that is the highest coverage. So that means that the most cases were covered. Most of the schools in this sample were that led to voice were in this path. There is another path though, and this is kind of where it's interesting, meaning that it's not all about labor management partnership. Collaborative leadership is maybe even more important, maybe even a prerequisite. I'm not saying that, but that is what the data is suggesting. So in voice path 2, there's partnership quality. There's no district level support, meaning that not the union president or the superintendent don't necessarily agree on the partnership. There's no teacher alignment on the principal and union rep relationship. But empowering leadership is present, and managerial openness is a don't care condition. So there's only 2 things that are present here, and one of them is empowering leadership, and the other one is partnership quality. In voice case 3, this is even more interesting, is that none of the partnership qualities that don't care condition, so it could be present or it could not, but the other 2 dimensions of partnership are not present. So it's only managerial openness or collaborative leadership, both measures of those that are present, and you still have voice. So this is essentially saying that in this case, and again, the coverage isn't as high as others, but in this case, you would not need a partnership in order to achieve voice, which again, isn't all that surprising. You can have a collaborative principle, but what I do think, what I do want to show, and then maybe I'll just skip to the conclusions, is that for high voice, you do need, at least according to this model, you do need at least some dimensions of partnership in order to achieve high voice. And again, this is a different measure. It was on a scale of 1 to 7, and it was designed to be a higher level of voice. But you also have, both dimensions of collaborative leadership present. So in this case, this is, and it's the high voice path is similar as the first voice path. In this case, they're the same. This is showing that in order to achieve high voice, you need to have both of these things present, suggesting complementarity. Obviously, there's contingencies there. I won't get into silence because you can still have some of these things present and not achieve voice, which I also think is interesting and something I would like to elaborate on, but I won't. I am just gonna try it. I'll end there because I want to save time for Q&A, and I know it's a long day. What I would like to do, and if people are interested, I have like qualitative data to back this up. Essentially, what I would want to do is present, QCA and then specific quotes based on these specific schools, in order to kind of illuminate what I found in this model. But anyway, thank you. I'll stop there.